Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. My name's Janice, and I'm here to introduce Caverly and share a little bit about this platform if you're just joining us for the first time today. Caverly Morgan is who's going to be offering this meditation and question and answer this morning. Caverly is a colleague and a dear friend of mine. She's a meditation teacher, she's a nonprofit leader, and she's ultimately a visionary. She's been offering contemplative teachings for the last 2 decades, starting to teach in 2001. And she's been offering a daily meditation series for the past week or so now. So thank you so much for joining us. And the format today will just be Caverly will guide a 30-minute meditation. And then after that, she'll open up to questions, which you can share and write in, or you also can request to come on screen with Caverly. This is a really beautiful community that Sangha Live, the Sangha Live platform, creates. You can see people saying good morning in the chat box. Feel free to say hello and look through all the different people tuning in from around the world. Before I turn it over to Caverly, I just want to say a couple things about this platform, Sangha Live. For the past 5 years, Sangha Live has offered a weekly meditation session every Sunday. And since COVID-19 has spread and really impacted people, Sangha Live decided to offer daily meditation sessions like this to support people. So this is all possible due to the generosity of others. You'll notice right below the video, there's a green button that says offer donation, Dana. So the whole Sangha Live platform and all of these teachings from Caverly and many other teachers are only possible because of the support and generosity of others. So if you have the financial means, please consider clicking on that button and sharing financially what you can. And if that's not possible for you right now, that is okay too. That's the beauty of this platform. The generosity of others allows this to be free and accessible to all. So I think I'm gonna turn it over to Caverly now. Let me bring her on the screen. Good morning, Caverly.
Hi. Hello, Janice. Good morning. So glad you're helping. Thank you.
Yes. I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Thanks, Janice. Hi, friends. Hello. I'm so glad that our technology is running smoothly this morning. Thank you so much to those of you who were patient yesterday as you attempted to log on and practiced being with the fact that Crowdcast had crashed. So thank you for showing up again. I really appreciate that you're here. And I want to acknowledge I was deeply touched that many people mentioned yesterday. First, I was surprised by how many people were willing to just hang out until we could see if we could get it fixed. And then when we couldn't, I was really touched that several people mentioned that they would donate, and probably many more did donate. And I just want to thank you for that. It's incredibly touching to see, and I find it inspiring when we access the generosity that's not that exchange that we so often see in a capitalist structure. I will give this for this, but it's really more about can we be in support of each other? Can we be in community? Can we recognize where the need is? Can we give what we can give? Can we receive? Can we allow that exchange to be free-flowing and from the heart? So thank you for that. I have been sitting with many questions that have come in these morning sessions that yesterday, as we didn't have a session, I sat with it and I realized there's a thread, there's a theme that I'm seeing through through some of the questions. That theme has to do with how can we be in relationship with others who are exhibiting a lot of the language that's often used in these questions is exhibiting a lot of negative energy. I wanted to touch today on our relationship to the way that the collective is processing what's going on in our world right now. So specifically collective fear. So we'll be beginning our meditation in just a moment, but before we do, often, if you've joined the call before, you know that I invite people to tell me what they're present to. For this morning, in the sidebar, in the chat, for this morning, I want to invite you to write down what's the theme or flavor of your conditioned story about what's happening in the world right now. What's the conditioned narrative that when you buy into it, when you believe it, you suffer? What is that narrative? Is it a narrative? Try to be as specific as you can about how the conditioned narrative has been taking shape. So an example might be, much of what's coming forward in the media is we're under attack. That's a very specific framing of what's going on. So, Brett, thank you. Doom. Yeah, it's easy to fall into a conditioned narrative of doom based on what's arising, that I'm unsafe. Yes, this is what I'm going for, is for us to name what our conditioned narrative is. Again, what's important about this from the perspective of practice is that this narrative, I'm suggesting, creates suffering when we identify with it. So let's see and name these narratives. That I'm on my own, that loss of vision with about a fear probably of loss of vision with leadership and selves, or a narrative about the loss of vision with our leadership and selves. That I'm isolated, but trying to reach out the best way I know how. That humans only care about themselves and their close family. Okay. Hello, Dudley. That I'm desperate to control. That I'm worried, especially for poor people in poor countries. That I am distancing from the realities of nature. That I'm helpless. That I should be doing more. Thank you. This is exactly what I want to bring to the surface as we go into this meditation. I'm vulnerable to unknown harmful things outside my control, that I can't trust other people and totally be safe, that there's uncertainty, that what we're being told is what we are being told true, not in a conspiracy theory way, but this is hard to read while it's moving up, but keep writing. But can we be confident that the right decisions are being made? Keep writing in. This is good practice for me. Reading and movement reading. People are lost in fear. They have to get their act together, that I'm privileged and I can feel, and that can feel painful and unfair. News, loss of control in my surroundings, loss of control, but also an opening. Fearful, terrible leadership in the UK, US, and elsewhere. The poorer people always suffer, annoyed at entitlement, misused and abused. Turning away, not wanting to confront the magnitude of it. The best, the worst, uncertainty, positive, negative. That I'm helpless against totalitarianism and injustice, but also that I'm privileged and so far okay, and so many are not. Beautiful. Now, clearly, there's a theme with our conditioned narratives. Thank you for bringing those narratives forward. As you can hear, it's quite easy to step into identification with a story, an internal narrative that dovetails with the story of the person sitting right next to us. So I want to acknowledge that when we have these kinds of narratives, we begin to then be operating in a mass consciousness field. And I'd like this morning to focus on how might we affect that field. Here's the ultimate takeaway from today, that suffering arises out of fear. It arises out of separation or the perception of separation. It arises in the mind, out of the mind. And that in practice, we can accept full responsibility for everything we perceive. This is not to invalidate these narratives. I too have been quite present to, for example, inequity during this time. This is not to invalidate that. It's not to say we're just going to call that an illusion and then go peace out in our meditation. Not at all. But I think it's important to recognize these narratives. We're going to say more about this at the end of this sit. Let's move into our meditation now. I just wanted to frame today. Thank you. So come into the position that works best for you. Taking 3 of the longest and deepest inhalations and exhalations you've taken yet today. And when you're ready, then take one more deep inhalation and exhalation that's even more full, more vast, more whole, reaching every part of the body. Imagine for a moment a young child running around, fearful, full of uncertainty, distressed, living within this collective field of fear. Open and therefore deeply affected by this field. for just a minute or two on your exhalation. Be still, child. I am here. For just a minute or two, allowing that to be a mantra of sorts. This be still, child is loving. It's not a controlled parental punishing voice. It's an offering. Be still. It's fine to rest. And when we say I am here, we are acknowledging I, presence, I, awareness, conscious, compassionate awareness, am here. Be still. You can be still here. So just repeating that with your exhalations for a few moments. We're in a time where the cultivation of refuge is important. Imagine for a moment that all those narratives that I read from the sidebar, all those conditioned stories, imagine for a moment that they were actually being spoken out loud in all directions surrounding you. You can easily see with that image how the result might be overwhelm, fear, inability to respond, therefore somewhat trapped in our habitual experience of reactivity. So for now, allow this young part of you to return to the refuge of presence. Notice how compelling it is to have the attention leave this refuge, move outward to one of these stories, these narratives, latch on. Notice the result of that latching. When the attention moves in this way, when it hooks on, and when we identify with these conditioned narratives, be clear in yourself about the result. There's so much now that we cannot control. Give your attention lovingly to what we have absolute choice about, and that's perception. This is not the same thing as telling ourselves a new story, a happier story, a story with a different ending. This is about unhooking from story, unhooking from the narrative of separation. This is our grand opportunity right now to unhook from the narrative of separation. This is life's invitation. Rather than falling for the story of separation and then acting from that narrative, practice stillness in the refuge of presence. Again, not a forced stillness. We're not chaining a dog to a fence. We're opening the doors of the heart, the doors that close when we feed the story of separation. freeing ourselves from all of these perceptions so that we can rest in the reality of who we actually are. We are not the fearful one. We are not the blaming one. We are not the one attempting to control, fix, change. Have faith that resting in this way, resting in oneness, in our very being, in our shared being, have faith that that is the medicine of our time. So much around us now attempts to assert a different narrative, one that perpetuates separation. Feeding that narrative with your attention is optional. Again, notice any temptation to abandon this refuge of presence and indulge a narrative of separation, which leads to fear. You don't need to push away these narratives. You don't need to shun them in any way. The choice is in your attention, where you place it. In the same way that we do not need to fear fear, we don't need to fear these narratives. We can simply see them for what they are, and then lovingly invite, be still, child. I am here. I, presence, I, awareness, am ever present. These narratives arise in me. Rest in the recognition that you are that which knows these narratives. You are not these narratives. This refuge can't be lost. It can be forgotten, but it can't be lost. For this refuge of presence is you. Allow presence to shine at the forefront of experience rather than to lay hidden in the backdrop. Friends, thank you so much. Before we have further exchange on this topic of refuge, resting, stillness, recognizing conditioned narrative, I do want to acknowledge again my gratitude for Sangha Live. There's more than one staff member working to make these calls happen in the background. It's such a gift that we have the support of this team and this platform. It's so touching too. They want this to be as successful as possible. You might notice I don't have my little earbuds in today, and I heard that it, scratches sometimes against my beads or against my hair. So I almost hesitate to move this because I want to make sure to put it back in the right spot. Anyway, this is not an advertisement for this particular microphone. Although maybe we should get them to sponsor the show, huh? It's just very touching to me that unprompted Sangha Live sent a very nice microphone. And then there's a halo light behind my computer now, which supports the lighting of this space. So all this is through the support of Sangha Live. Please donate if you can to keep this going. The button is the green one right below where you see me right now. So what did you notice about that meditation? What do you notice about these narratives? Unhooking. What do you notice about the refuge of presence? I see one question here from Sandy. How can I better associate being safe, in quotes, with emotional safety rather than physical? Sandy, I would encourage you to consider that we can think beyond even emotional safety. So it's like there are realms of experience. There's physical safety, there's emotional safety. The safety we're talking about in today's session is the safety of what isn't born, what doesn't die, what isn't swayed by our emotional experience, the safety of what isn't tarnished by our fear. That's what we're being asked to take refuge in now. And as we mentioned, as we look around in our conditioned world, that's not the pointing that the conditioned world is offering. The conditioned world is offering a very different narrative, a narrative that hinges on fear. The first thing I woke up to this morning once I touched in with the computer was the message of blame. This is this person's fault. We're so eager to blame. It's not the case. Again, I don't want to dismiss that there are some really unfortunate decisions that have been made, unfortunate decisions that are having incredible impact on people. We don't need to dismiss that, but we can recognize that those unfortunate decisions arose out of the distortion of separation. We don't need to perpetuate that perception of separation. We can take responsibility for our perception. the safety. That's the certainty. And it's a great Zen paradox. It's the certainty. This certainty is resting in the uncertainty of I don't know mind, rather than the apparent certainty of identity, the identity of blaming, the identity of fear. I say identity because all of those experiences are experiences that arise on behalf of this separate self. Dudley, thank you for your note on the sidebar. Sandra, Nathalie, I hope I'm saying that right. Maybe it's Natalie, but thank you. I see your notes. Another question, this one, John and Nancy, hello. I appreciate that embracing these narratives leads to separation and suffering, but I'm concerned that refuge also suggests passivity and inaction. Do we need to do more with this illness and inequality? Thank you, John and Nancy, very much for writing in. As you know by now, because John and Nancy, I've seen you all tune in, and welcome back. Thank you for your consistency, your presence, your showing up for practice. As you know by now, I care very much about how we move through the world. I wouldn't be doing the work that I do on the relative plane if I didn't have a great deal of care for humanity. What I practice working with is seeing the difference between allowing that care to be so overflowing, allowing that love to be so overflowing that it overflows into action. The difference between that and that care and that love being distorted, co-opted by the illusion of a separate self that now needs to fight. I want to be clear, I'm not suggesting that there's something wrong with fighting, but just notice what can result should you go down that road so fully that you become seeped in the story that you're separate. Because I'm separate, I now need to fight this. That perpetuates the narrative that leads to suffering. Again, it's not bad or wrong. Suffering isn't bad or wrong. It's simply a consequence. So I invite you to look at nourishing and feeding your love. You wouldn't be reporting to me about illness and inequality if you didn't care. So allow your action to be action that's on behalf of love rather than the story of separation. Thank you. I look forward to seeing how that lands for you. Again, if you'd like to come on screen, please do. Janice will help us do that. You can just type in the sidebar there. How do we affect change for the better for all beings without it being an us against them or coming from a place of conditioned stories? It feels like these stories can drive action to make changes for a better world. How do we do it differently from a place of refuge? Jim. Clearly, Jim, I'm with you, you're with me, you're with John and Nancy. I hope I just got your names right, John and Nancy Williams. I think it was. Let me check. I want to, yes, John and Nancy Wilson. Jim, you're with us. and we're with you. I think it's the great question of our time. It seems to me that this is a time that we're being asked to shed the story of separation. We can feel our global consciousness, our interconnection in global consciousness more directly. Many of us are feeling it more directly than we ever have. And what's promising to me about this time is many who never have considered spiritual teachings of any kind are feeling this. Even the simple act of, I'm going to place a mask over my face, is an act of, I care. I see that I affect you. So what I'm curious about, and what I invite you to be curious about as well, is what shifts in this time if we harness our shared desire to be freed from the story of separation. Again, how might we move through the world on behalf of our knowing that we're not separate? And how do our actions in the world change when we're grounded in that knowing that we're not separate? It's very important that these questions are arising, because I'm not at all an advocate for inactivity. I'm also not an advocate for forced activity. I'm grateful to know that somewhere on this planet, monks are reciting prayers, chanting, meditating. Their activity, if you will, is the activity of holding a flame of light within this global consciousness. Their practice is their gift to the world. If you feel called in a different direction, beautiful. I do. I feel called in a different direction. I feel called to be actively engaged on the relative plane, at least at this time in my life. My practice is to attend to whether my actions are coming from my understanding of our oneness, my understanding of our interconnection, my recognition of what gets distorted as we feed the story of separation. My practice is to come back to the choice of resting in the truth of a non-separate reality, rather than to have distortion continue to be perpetuated and maintained, because my attention has fed the story that I am other than, and I need to help, I need to fix, I need to change myself or others. We have enough evidence that actions on behalf of a separate self don't lead to the peace that we all long for, personally, globally. Thank you, Jem, for writing in. I hope that addresses your question. Sandy, thank you for your comment. Yes, I believe that this resting in the knowledge of what is unchanging, undisturbed, ever-present, and whole does radiate out. Truth cannot be contained. Again, it's ever present. the story of separation is resonating through our collective field right now. So together, let's take responsibility in our practices for knowing truth, for resting in who we are, for moving through the world on behalf of the recognition of our shared being. So thank you so much. I very much appreciate these questions that have come in. These questions, your experience shapes mine. This is our interconnection playing out. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for donating to Sangha Live if you can, to support this work in the world during this time. I wish you a blessed weekend, and I look forward to seeing anyone who would like to join me Monday. I actually can't remember if we've announced that we're just going to do this in an ongoing way for now. I actually have a vacation coming up, but this isn't work for me. This is this community of practice and being in community together as we remember truth. This is medicine for our time. So I'm honored to be here, and I'm honored to have you joining me. And I look forward to seeing you Monday. And please let your friends know as well. Thank you for supporting Sangha Live.